All right, we're a minute after the hour, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today for elementary and student services job seekers. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so if you do need to leave at any point, don't worry about that. We'll be sending the recording within 24 hours to everyone who is registered for the webinar. You are on mute and we cannot see your video. Feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel to ask the presenters questions throughout the webinar. We'll be monitoring the Q&A periodically, and we'll do our best to address your question live. But if there's something very specific to your search or something that we can't get to in the time allotted, we'll be sure to follow up with you. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to our presenters today.
Hi everybody, glad you could all come. Before we get started, we should go around and introduce ourselves just in case y'all needed a reminder. I can start. I'm Becca. I assist LeeAnn on the learning services and guidance counseling team. I also used to do elementary, so I do recognize some of your names and excited to get to chat with you all again. And then I'll pass over to LeeAnn and LeeAnn.
My name is LeeAnn. I am working with elementary and lower school candidates. I myself was a lower school teacher. I actually taught for 6 years prior to working at Carney Sandoe. But now I'm in my 6th year at Carney Sandoe. So I'm excited to be sharing some tips and tricks and hopefully some helpful information with you all.
Hi, everybody. My name is LeeAnn. As Becca said, I run the learning services and guidance counselor placement services. I still do music as well. I've been doing music here for 6 years. Like LeeAnn, I used to teach before this. I was a music teacher at All Saints Episcopal School in Fort Worth, Texas, where I taught for 2 years. And I've also done a summer program at Loomis Chafee boarding school. So somewhat familiar with the independent school world. And yeah, to echo my colleagues, I hope you find some useful information in here for your job search.
So just to review like what we're going to be talking about in the next, several minutes, 30, 45 minutes or so. We'll talk about like current marketing trends and predictions. This year is a lot different from other years with COVID, just kind of taking everything for a loop. We'll talk about what schools are looking for in the candidates, how to use your CandidateConnect, those documents, referrals, what a referral looks like, the different types of referrals. We'll also talk about like the hiring process and timelines, what we expect like this year's timelines to look like, and how it might have been different last year and from previous years. We'll also talk about conferences a little bit and what's coming up in the next few months, and then how the best way to work with us and how to utilize us as well. And then also have time for questions at the end. And as Julie said at the beginning, questions do come up. Feel free to shoot us a question and we'll hopefully answer it as we're talking, but hopefully get to everybody's question by the end.
All right, well, as you can imagine, one of the questions that we have been asked a lot is what happened this past year with hiring and what is going to happen in 2021. So happy to give you a little bit of a summary for those of you who weren't searching. We did have a very late season hiring market. A lot of our schools, as you can imagine, did not know what their fall was going to look like. So our normal busy season last spring was very slow, and we did not hear much from schools until the summer, really. We actually had a lot of last-minute job openings and a lot of schools wanting to hire more faculty. There was a lot of virtual hiring, and we ended up putting a lot of information on our website. If you're not familiar, definitely go to our blog, go to our website. We have a lot of information about what that virtual hiring looked like. Instead of on-campus demo lessons, they were mostly online, and a lot of other things changed. So we can certainly talk to you about that and how that might continue this year. But just to familiarize yourself, definitely utilize those resources we have on our website. And so, yeah, we had a lot of schools that were even in September and October continuing to search for this year. What we think is going to probably happen is because schools are still trying to figure out how to complete the rest of this school year, they might push some of their searches for next fall back a few months. That's sort of what our prediction is. However, we are seeing positions already for next fall. So it's definitely great that you're on board now, because there are opportunities, and building your file so that you're ready to go if and when a position comes up that you're interested in is definitely a good idea. But we are thinking that some of the schools might not list as early as they normally do. We might see positions normally starting in December, January, and we're thinking maybe a couple months before we really get the bulk of our listings. And that also means that, you know, if it's March and April, don't panic. Reach out to your placement team, and we can give you an update at that point as well. There might be schools that are just, they haven't started their search yet. So yeah, we are going to be planning for a normal hiring season. I think most of the schools are hoping that by next fall, everything will be back in person. Some changes most likely will stay, but I think that most schools are going to try and hire candidates who will be able to be on campus. However, we definitely know that a lot of schools are hoping to find candidates who are comfortable virtually teaching, just because we never know. So that's something to keep in mind. But we will continue to put information on our blog and website as the next couple of months roll out. If there's any changes, any updates, sort of generally, definitely keep an eye out on our blog, and we'll try and share as much information as we can.
Well said, LeeAnn. Yeah, I think if you wanted to paint this last year in sort of broad brushstrokes, I think typically schools tend to be proactive in their hiring, especially compared to public schools. You know, hiring will typically start a year out. So international schools will list jobs a whole year in advance. Like they would list jobs typically for this fall if they were looking for somebody next fall. And schools stateside will tend to figure things out by January, February, or March. So they're about 6 months ahead of the game in terms of when they realize they're going to have openings, or when they hear whispers of you know, faculty who are leaving for whatever reason. And with COVID, I think, like we all did, schools had to be reactive and not proactive. So that was why, if any of you searched with us last year for this school year, the spring felt very quiet, because it was. I mean, we were down almost, I think, 90 to 95% in job listings March, April, and May, which tend to be 3 of our busiest months. And that was just because schools, you know, like the whole world froze and was trying to figure out what their fiduciary state essentially was going to be this year. And then, yeah, like LeeAnn, I kind of hearkened to, this fall was pretty exceptionally busy for us with last minute openings. Driven by, you know, changing state laws, new school policies, teachers, unions, what parents and families felt comfortable with, which faculty and staff were healthy to come back, who felt safe or, you know, comfortable emotionally coming back in person. And then, you know, there were even some dynamics where teachers, you know, thought they were going to come back in person, but then the school that their kids are going to went remote. And so they had to pull out at the last minute. And so they needed, you know, just sort of like a warm body to fill that job. So it was very kind of last minute, fly by night hiring this fall. And I think if you see positions from us that say mid-year, that's because, you know, we've seen a ton of mid-year openings this year as schools, again, try to figure out like what their winter is going to look like now that numbers are rising, or now that, you know, people's perspectives and or family situations and or professional situations, living situations have changed just that much since the summer. But I would also say at this point, if you are looking for the fall and you see a mid-year job from us, I would say apply anyways, because they might not find the right person, or they might be able to cobble together some sort of internal coverage, somebody who's already working there, and then look for, you know, a full-time person for next year. So I wouldn't be too dissuaded if you see mid-year opportunities from us. I would still apply and just say I'm available for the fall in case, you know, that's how your schedule works out.
Definitely make sure you update that available start date on your CandidateConnect profile. I know that it often is overlooked, but we do look at that. And so if you say that you're available in May and it's coming up to May, we potentially might send your file. So please do make sure that that gets updated. And again, if you really only want to see positions for next fall, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you communicate that.
Cool. Well, we can move on to our next topic, which is in general what schools want, or what schools might be looking for among candidates. And I think the number one thing that is obvious, but is worth pointing out is just ability to teach remotely. You know, ability to instruct on Zoom, to gather together a classroom on Zoom. Virtual skill set came up huge this year. And I think will continue to be so. In terms of where our schools are, remote versus hybrid versus in-person learning, they're really all over the place just because we work with schools in all 50 states. And so, all of the states have different governors and all of those schools have their own boards of directors who are deciding what to do. Some teachers are unionized, some teachers aren't. So we've seen everything from 100% in person to 100% remote to a hybrid model where teachers are actually teaching part of the time in person and then part of the time, in the afternoon and evening, recording, webinar type lessons actually for those students. So certainly, just boning up on Zoom and being able to discuss any sort of virtual skill set that you've developed this year, whether you are currently actively teaching on Zoom or whether you're not, maybe you're in a different profession altogether, or maybe you're in a profession that's in person, but just emphasizing that you be comfortable, and if not comfortable, certainly flexible and willing to learn how to use things like Google Classrooms and Zoom or Teams to do breakout lessons, demos, whatever it is that you need. The other thing in general would be flexibility, just because this year, at least, we've seen schools change their structure or change their plan multiple times throughout the year. We've had some schools who have closed early for winter break or who aren't bringing students back until February, or schools that are going to start in January when everyone comes back from winter break remote, but then 2 weeks later move to hybrid, and then hopefully by February they'll be in person. Basically any like permutation you can think of, schools are trying, I think, just depending on what their situation is. So being flexible with that. And again, if you're looking for next year, we're pretty confident at this point that you'll be instructing in person, and the school, that's the ultimate goal for the school. But I think it's just something to be cognizant of when you're interviewing, is that the person interviewing you has had to jump through a lot of hoops this year, and navigate, a lot of different and sometimes competing voices in terms of student well-being, parents, what teachers wanted, what administrators wanted, what administrators are hearing from their board or from the parents. So coming off as somebody who is very adaptable, very flexible, I think would be helpful. The other thing I think that has struck a chord across the candidates who we've talked to is the idea of being resilient. I think this was obviously not planned, and it's been a huge strain on everybody. Professionally, emotionally, just sort of location-wise, geographically, whether you're someone who's completely healthy and it's just a major inconvenience that you can't go anywhere, to people who have had family members or loved ones or friends die of this disease, to people who have lost their jobs, to schools that have had to, sort of reorg and lay off people. I think a lot of candidates and a lot of schools are feeling, maybe burnt out is a little bit too extreme, but certainly like this is the most challenging year they've faced in a while. And so I think you can expect questions about, what was a challenge you faced this school year? How did you overcome it? How did your school handle COVID? And particularly for those of you in the student services or guidance counselor realms, your roles almost become amplified in a time of sort of general crisis, like a pandemic, right? I mean, certainly the emotional well-being of students and faculty is in jeopardy this year, as would be kind of, populations who are vulnerable when you can keep an eye on them in the classroom, such as, kids with ADHD or learning differences. But if they're at home unmonitored, parents are both working and they're just on Zoom, I mean, that's a really difficult environment to learn in. And so I think you can expect questions from schools regarding, the challenges you faced and how you've dealt with them. And I think your answer, as long as it's authentic, will be strong. I mean, you certainly don't want to say everything's perfect if it's not. I mean, I think you have the chance to be real and to be vulnerable, and I think schools would appreciate that, because that's what we're certainly hearing from schools and from candidates, is that they're just, the general level of like overwhelmness and stress is very high, being anybody who works in a school right now. So just acknowledging that and being prepared to talk about that in an interview, I think would be helpful. So on that note, because obviously most of the interviewing is happening over Zoom, you're not necessarily going to have the chance to do an in-person demo lesson. You may, again, if the majority of people are vaccinated in the community by like April or May or whenever it is, and they feel comfortable bringing you to campus and you feel comfortable going. But I think, there'll be a lot more virtual hiring and virtual interviewing this year than in prior years. And so that means if they can't see you directly with kids, they're going to ask you some scenario-based questions. So what to do if a student's acting out, or, you just heard this information from a parent, how would you handle it? Or an argument broke out in your class, how'd you handle that? A student's IEP didn't register in time for whatever test and the parents are complaining, how would you handle that? So sort of like, how would you handle challenging scenarios or particular kind of social or academic settings or happenings in your classroom? I think that would be important to prepare some of those.
One thing just to chime in about that flexibility piece, specifically to the lower school elementary candidates, is I know that there's a lot of schools right now that need that flexibility with grade level. So I do understand everyone has a preference. I taught second grade and I love that age group, but a lot of the schools when listing jobs are probably going to be listing a general, maybe upper, lower, but often just elementary school teacher. So if you can be flexible with your grade level preference, that's going to be really helpful. If you can't, that's fine. Please do communicate both to me and to the school. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I have experience with. And a lot of times with independent schools, they can change around some teachers. They might just not know what they're looking for and what they're going to need. So for you to say, here's what I can do, that can actually be really helpful for them. So just to emphasize that flexibility piece specifically for lower school candidates, that grade level flexibility is helpful, especially if you can go down to early childhood or maybe even cross over into middle school. Again, that's really, really helpful, and I recommend putting any of that information in your personal statement. It's a good place to put that and communicate that to schools.
The last major thing that I think all schools are sort of taking a look in the mirror about this year, in addition to the kind of economic and public health crises that we're facing, is racial injustice and the ideas of diversity and equity in these schools, and sort of how they've handled that as institutions in the past and how they want to handle it moving forward. So I would definitely be prepared to talk about any sort of DEI initiative that you feel passionate about, something that you've started on campus, books that you're reading, professional development sessions that you've attended. And so when I say talk about, you can mention it in an interview, but you can also feel free to put it in a personal statement or a resume. Make sure it's written down somewhere and the school can read it. The school contact, could read it. And obviously we know that, everybody, every institution, every individual is sort of in a different place, opinion wise, but also just sort of like knowledge wise on how to create this, sort of like anti-racist classroom, or what in your teaching is indicative of some sort of bias and how you can eliminate that. And we're proud to have called together some resources from really top experts, but some people internally on our search committee, and others, other sort of thought leaders in this space. So definitely go to our puzzle blog to see some resources on how you can improve this skill set, what you might read next. And if you're just getting started, different avenues you can explore, different sessions or potential conferences you could attend, whether virtually or in person, this year or next year. But that's for sure a big focus and a big kind of passion of schools that I think was always sort of there, but has certainly awakened in light of national events, the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality and everything that's been in the news. So certainly be prepared to talk about what you're doing or what you know, or maybe what you don't know, but how you plan to learn it.
Great. I think that can nicely transition us into the file and referrals and how to use your CandidateConnect account and what should be on it. As Liam and LeeAnn were saying, your resume and personal statement can be really powerful tools to help you in your job search. Definitely including PD and just classes you're taking, and your virtual teaching abilities are great things to have. All right, so I can just go through a resume. That's the first and foremost thing we need in order to pretty much send your file anywhere. As schools are just going to require it. So if you don't have a resume up, if you're going to prioritize anything for us, it's putting a resume on your profile so that we can send it places. Next is your personal statement. We get a lot of questions about personal statement. Julie has a really wonderful couple of blog posts about what's the best way to write a personal statement. But essentially, it's a one-page document describing your best practices and beliefs in the classroom. I always get questions about one-page double or single space. It's kind of, Whatever feels right. I mean, if you need to go over a page, that's totally fine. It's more about making sure that you are like succinct in your answer a bit more than just like a maximum number of pages. Letters of reference are great to have, or even like a type of reference list would be great. I also get a question a lot about, well, what if you're confidentially searching and you don't really want to tell your school yet that you're looking? How do you get references and when's a good time for that? It is totally fine to hold off on your letters of reference if you want to keep your search confidential. There will be a point, you know, where you get into the interview process with schools where it's time for them to contact your references. And then we're going to also agree that it's time to tell your school that you're searching if you get to that point. So if you are confidentially searching, don't worry, letters of reference can come later. But if you have any letters of reference, that's great to upload as well. And then the different types of referrals. So as I'm sure most of you see, you guys can get referrals in one of two ways typically. Every time we'll send you an email that we put something in your account. If we think, you know, you're really awesome for the job, it's exactly what you're looking for, it's where you would like to be, we pretty much just send your file and then you'll be able to read into it, the position and the school a little bit more and decide, you know, do you want to follow up with the school? The school most likely will ask for a cover letter. I'm sure most of you have seen the follow-up directions in the position description, but you just would follow those. And the other way we send it is we're not 100% sure if you are interested in that position or not. That's when we'll ask you first. You've maybe seen that. It will either say, we think you're interested in the position. Should we send your materials or would you like to decline the position? Again, you'll be able to read more about the position in the school. And if so, if you do decide to send your materials, then it looks the same as the other. Just make sure then you're reading those follow-up directions to see what the school is asking you to do. I also get a lot of questions is what if the follow-up direction says do not follow up? Should I still send an email? No, don't send an email. We promise the school has your materials. We've sent them your stuff. You do not need to follow up. So don't worry about that. I promise you, you do not need to send an email. There's also a great spot on your profile to add a video. And in a time of COVID, when you're not able to see somebody in person and, you know, show a demo lesson or just even have like an introduction about yourself, adding a video to your profile has been really popular. Schools are able to kind of just get a better sense of you, how you speak, and just kind of a little bit more about you that's not on paper. So adding a video would be great. I think there is like this 2-minute video that we provide on your website that you can film yourself. So that would be great to add as well. There also is a way for you to view your profile as a school sees it. So if you would like, you can click into that. You'll be able to see, well, what does the school see and how does it come off? And from the top of my head, I think that's pretty much it. I'll ask Leah and LeeAnn if I'm missing anything. I'm sure I am. There's a lot of things.
We've done a really good job of expanding the profile. So if candidates are interested in including things like there is actual additional questions, you can put down if you are proficient in certain curriculum. So really I would explore the profile because the schools see that information and they have told us that when they see a candidate who has, you know, those documents and they've really kind of completed the whole profile, they do see that candidate as a more seriously, you know, candidate seriously searching. You don't have to, a lot of it's optional, so if you don't feel you have to, but it is helpful if you want to get more information out to the school, certainly explore that profile a bit more and you should find those opportunities on there.
That's great. I also do want to add, because I did forget it, also a great thing to utilize is if we send you a referral and you do not like, doesn't really fit what you're looking for and you just decide to decline it for whatever reason, send us a note with why it's not great. That's always so helpful in figuring out how to best guide your search from there. So if you can just send us a note, maybe it's the location isn't great or the age level isn't what you were thinking about, sending a note along with it is always so helpful.
And do try and get to those pending referrals as soon as you can. You know, a lot of times the schools will look at the referrals pretty quickly after they list the position. So if you do wait, which is fine if you want to take some time to decide. Just know that, you know, you want to make sure you send it as quickly as you can so the schools do have access to your information. And I honestly tell my candidates that I would make a decision right away, and then if you need a day or two to then follow up, that's fine. We'd rather have at least your information sent to the school so the opportunity is there for them to potentially follow up with you. And then if you want to follow up with a cover letter or completing the application when you get a chance, that works too. And we know sometimes it gets overwhelming with the number of referrals. Please just try your best to keep up. And if for whatever reason you need us to just kind of put things on hold, that's fine. Just let us know and communicate with us.
We got a great question about videos, and is it okay to make a compilation of like a 10-second hello and a little bit about your teachings, practices and beliefs? Absolutely. That's a great way to give like a little bit of an insight onto how you are as an educator. Definitely okay to make a little bit of a compilation of yourself saying, hi, who I am, and then also showing how you teach.
I have heard from some candidates they've been having issues with the video on CandidateConnect. So either way, I definitely recommend uploading a video, whether it's YouTube or another platform. It's underneath online materials. That way you can make it exactly however long you want it to be with whatever content. You could upload an intro of you, but you could also then, if you could put a video of you teaching or interacting with students, that's super helpful as well. I know some candidates who maybe aren't currently teaching asked me, what do I do? How do I share a teaching demo? And they just used friends and family because at least it's showing you interacting as an instructor. And so that is helpful for schools, which is just an idea if you were interested in it. All right, LeeAnn, anything to add before we jump into kind of our process and timeline?
I don't think so, no. Thank you.
So I know we touched on this a bit earlier about timeline. In a normal hiring season, we do get some jobs, especially international schools, posting positions with us in December and January. And most of the jobs that come in, I normally say they serve as a wave in January, February. And then there's a second wave when contracts are due back, which is sometime in March and April. Of course, every school is different, so it doesn't always fall in those categories, but we tend to see those two different waves. And so we are expecting the same thing this year, although potentially with a little bit of a pushback. So we'll probably start seeing more positions after the new year. Once schools get back, they kind of start thinking about the fall. February tends to be busy, especially since with Carney Sandoe, we have a lot of our hiring conferences at that time, which tends to get a lot of schools thinking about the fall. And then, like I said, when contracts come back, schools know for sure who they are going to need to hire. We tend to get another wave in March and April. So we really don't know what the fall or what the winter and spring is going to look like, but that's sort of what we're predicting and what we're planning for. Although if we get a bunch of jobs in May and June again, we won't be totally surprised. But that's generally kind of what the hiring timeline looks like. And of course, it does also depend on you and your search, your geographical preferences. Any college seniors out there are actually probably already getting a lot of referrals because intern and fellowships often get listed in the fall. Schools know they're hiring interns every year, so they tend to list those positions and start interviewing candidates sooner. So, again, depending on your search, your experience level, where you're looking, the timeline can definitely look different. So feel free to contact your placement team, take a look at our puzzle blog if you have questions, or if you just want to get a general idea of kind of what to expect. And there is sometimes summer hiring. So like we had this past summer, things can happen after June. We'll wait and see sort of how much activity we have, but that can happen. But it is good to come on board sooner rather than later because most of the time schools try and get their hiring done before the summer. One thing we did want to touch on is contracts. So we do know that the schools that we work with, they do have a contract, and sometimes it's at will, sometimes it's just a verbal communication. But if you do end up communicating with your current school that you're going to be staying, we do ask that you let us know. We can have a conversation about it, but most of the time that means that we'll, inactivate your search and you've made the commitment now to your school, and so we can touch base for the following year. But we do know that can be tricky, so feel free to reach out to us and we can have a conversation. But we'd much rather be in the loop regarding your thinking on that, and if you obviously do end up signing a contract, so that we can then keep our information updated on our end about your search and your search status. So yeah, Any other process, timeline questions, again, like we've mentioned, check out the blog. We've got tons of information generally if you have any questions.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll talk about another kind of process that's changed for us and a timeline that's certainly changed for us, but another resource to you in terms of your job hunt would be our conferences. And if you're not familiar with them, historically, they've been sort of speed dating events for schools and candidates. So typically we book out a hotel ballroom in a city, and tens, if not hundreds of school contacts set up shop in these tables that are all arranged in rows. And candidates arrive and schools schedule 30-minute interviews, sort of like first round, just preliminary conversations with candidates as an alternative to the phone interview. So it's basically an in-person sort of first round interview stage type thing. Obviously, they're going to have to be all virtual this year, and our conference team has done an excellent job reimagining these. And we're actually going to roll out a new event and sort of tweak a very popular, awesome event, which is our diversity conference. But so just take a look at those dates, and this information is all available on our website, of course, and you can register for whichever events you'd like. If you have questions about which ones you should register for, feel free to reach out to your placement team. But our first event is going to be the diversity forum. That's the hiring component of that is January 27th through the 29th. So that's 3 full days. And I believe all days are approximately 8 hours of 30-minute slots of interviews. So you can register virtually. Schools are going to register virtually, and then they'll contact you via email or via basically our module system, where you'll be able to log in and see when you have interviews and with whom, at what school, for what job. This event this year includes 11 full days of professional development surrounding DEI kind of work in classrooms or in schools. If you'd like to register for just the professional development component, you are able to do so. We distinguish between those who are looking for a job and who are looking for professional development. If you want to sign up for both, more than welcome to. But if you were interested in just one of those components, you don't have to sign up for both, I guess is what we mean to say. Then our next event is going to be February 18th and 19th. This basically takes the place of our flagship Boston forum, our oldest event, and typically one of our largest in the peak of sort of mid-season winter of the school job season. And then the next event is new for us. So this is a STEM or science, technology, engineering, math, and innovation professional development themed conference. So it's going to be 2 full days of hiring plus 1 week or 5 full days of professional development. And I should say too, so for both the diversity and STEM and innovation events, when we say professional development, I think it will look like webinars. Some will be pre-recorded, some will be live. I imagine some might include some sort of breakout room opportunity, but it won't be super interactive would be my guess. But still a good place to get some information if these things are of interest to you. For sure. And then our last event to sort of wrap up our conference season will be our spring forum at the end of March. And that if you're familiar with our old conferences, that sort of takes the place of perhaps our link event, with the NAIS conference or one of our later season spring conferences in New York or Washington, DC. And if that's not familiar to you, that's totally fine. So everything's going to look a little bit different this year.
We had a question. How do we know what schools will attend these events?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think 2 weeks or so before the event, perhaps 1 week, you will get access to what I referenced as the conference module. All that is basically a website that we create. It's just another login page where, as a candidate, you'll be able to log in and see the list of schools that are attending. I don't believe we'll publish a list of positions just because schools like to come with that, with their cards pretty close to the vest. Oftentimes they don't even tell us the positions. We learn about the positions at these conferences. So you'll be able to see the hiring contacts and the schools that are attending, and you'll also have the functionality or the capability to email or message those contacts if you've already applied to a job there, if you just got a referral from us, or whatever it is. You'll have the ability to interact with the school that way. And within that module, that's where you'll also see your blank schedule that will hopefully fill up with interviews in various slots based on when schools are available. So that's how you'll see what schools are in attendance.
And to clarify for anyone who has gone to a conference in the past, often we've had conferences that were location based. So these conferences will be national. The Boston conference is not just for Boston schools or even just New England. So we'll make sure all that information is clear, but in terms of the schools that are going to be there, you know, besides the STEM and DEI, which you can imagine are schools looking for those positions, and or, you know, the DEI specifically are schools who are really interested in candidates who have an interest in that as well. But they're national events, so the schools won't be from just a specific region or location.
Yeah, great point, LeeAnn. Thank you. I forgot to say that. So in our old conferences, we'd have a couple of national events. Our Boston event was typically national, as LeeAnn said, but the New York and Washington, D.C. events that I mentioned were typically regional. Whereas this year, just by being virtual, you know, anybody can sign up for any of them. So we're expecting a larger crowd for sure, or a more geographically, you know, broad crowd.
Another perk that we saw last year with our virtual conferences was that sometimes your dream school just isn't able to interview you that day, but because, you know, you were signed up for the conference, the school now has all of your information, your resume, and you're able to schedule interviews outside of the conference date. So even if you signed up for a conference and maybe you don't have as many interviews as you hoped you'd have scheduled, a lot of schools then still go back into the module and look at, you know, maybe they didn't know that they had an elementary teaching opening, you know, a week ago before the conference, but now they do. And because you were signed up, they're able to go look at all of their people in there in the module. So that's also like just a little perk on the outside, is that the school still has your information, even if you don't get to interview with them on that day.
Very good point, Becca. Yeah, and the only other scenario that might come up more often is if you know, say you're a learning specialist or a guidance counselor candidate, and there is an opening at that school that you know about and you've applied to, but you don't get an interview. That might just be because the hiring contacts have decided, like, no, we really need to focus on our English candidates, or we really need to find an academic dean, you know, at this event, or just start interviewing for that. But as Becca said, they'll log back in and say, oh, I see you attended that conference. We do have your information. Sorry, we didn't get to you that day, but, you know, when do you have time to connect? So it's still worth signing up for and registering, even if the day of is not as fruitful for you as you would have liked.
And I'm sure you might all have additional questions, and that's great. We will answer as many of them as we can with our blog posts, with our email communication. And as the time gets closer, you know, we'll make sure we're sending announcemements of how to prepare, what specifically you need to be doing. Do you have to take the day off? You know, that's all that information will be available to you. And of course, if you have questions in the meantime, you can ask us. But the conferences are a great opportunity. Honestly, if you are at all available, even if it's just for a couple of hours during that day, we recommend registering. And, you know, if you don't get an interview, that's okay. Like we were just saying, maybe you at least get that exposure to the school. And at least it's an opportunity in your job search to potentially talk to a school. And there is also, we'll explain, you know, once we send out the information, but we'll explain how there's actually an opportunity to reach out to schools directly. So it definitely is worth registering for, and you can register right through CandidateConnect. All right. Anything else about conferences before we move forward?
I think so.
As we kind of talk, our last slide is just sort of a little bit of information just to remind you about working with us, tips and tricks. While I'm going through this, if anyone else has questions, please do put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them right after. So just a couple of reminders, you know, we are your team. We really want to help you. The candidates who I have found most successful in finding a job through Carney Sandoe have been those who have been most in touch and communicative. You don't need to email us every day, but letting us know, you know, if you're interviewing with the school, let us know if we're not sending you the right referrals. I think that's the best way for us to work together to help you find hopefully a good fit position for the fall. So keep in touch, give us that feedback. You know, if there's a job that you're super excited about, let us know. We can then advocate for you to the school. You can write that in the notes section of the referral, or you can email us. If you have an interview with the school tomorrow and you're just not sure how to prepare, you know, you can call us if it's urgent and you need to get a last minute question answered. We'd rather you do that than not tell us, and then, you know, unfortunately there's not as much we can do afterwards. So keep in touch, you know, give us feedback. And then I think we mentioned this earlier, but just to keep reiterating, make decisions on those referrals. If we send you a pending referral, please go in, and whether it's through the email or going into CandidateConnect, at least make the decision of whether to send or decline. you're not interested, please make a note about the reason why. And then, again, you need to follow up later, that's fine, but making those decisions is going to be the best way to kind of move forward in your search. Yeah, continuing to check CandidateConnect for updates. Maybe you missed something, so make sure that you get in there, make sure your profile's updated, your documents look good, especially right now it's December, so there's going to be hopefully some time that you're going to have to work on that, but whether it's a weekend or another break, or just taking an hour. I know I talked to a lot of candidates who really need to, schedule, whether it's an hour or two every week, to go into Carney Sandoe's, CandidateConnect and, follow up on referrals, be in touch with us. And if that's what you need to do, great. Whatever works best for you. We want to help you. We want to be your ally. So hopefully you can do that.
I think another major piece that's important is not only consistent communication with us, but consistent communication with the school. So you would be very perhaps disappointed in your fellow job seekers, or perhaps surprised that school communications sometimes go unanswered. And we would recommend that you absolutely do not do that at any cost, even if you have 0% intention of taking the job, or it's not interesting at all to you. That doesn't mean you can't send, polite professional email back saying thanks, but my plans have changed, or here's the situation why I'm not interested, but good luck in your search. And in terms of the communication that you'll be sending pretty consistently to schools, that includes a cover letter. So that, and this, we might've touched on this previously when Becca was talking about the materials in your file, but that's actually different than your personal statement. So the personal statement is a little bit more personal, and it's a little bit more general, which sounds sort of counterintuitive, but that's where you can share anecdotes about students or a particular challenge in the classroom that made you just realize that this was the job for you, or it's something that you're very proud of, an individual effort. And you sort of can talk about those specific examples in a more general context of who you are as an educator, why you love to do this. Whereas a cover letter, you want to drill down into, here are my professional skills that would suit me in this particular role. Here's why I'm very interested in your school. The mission statement aligns with me, or I've heard great things from friends of mine who have sent their kids there, or, you have an excellent soccer program, and I was a college soccer player and I'd like to coach if possible. Independent schools are very proud of their own individual identities that are very purposefully cultivated in terms of the kind of students and families they attract, or what their history is, or what their sort of flagship academic or not academic programs are. And the more you can tap into that and demonstrate that you've done the research, the more likely you are to get a phone call. The sort of boilerplate cover letter where you just sort of generally restate your resume. Obviously, there's going to be some stuff that you can repeat from letter to letter, but you'll want to target each correspondence particularly to the school.
Well, that actually starts to answer one of the questions that we got for the Q&A. We did get a couple questions before the webinar started, and one of them was, what are some common mistakes that educators make while applying? And definitely that is absolutely a mistake, is that some candidates don't reply promptly to schools. That is something, top of the list. If a school emails or calls you, make sure you respond to them right away. Again, even if you're not interested. So, that is absolutely going to be a priority. And then if you are not sure how to respond to a school, of course, you can always reach out to us. We can help with that. And then, as LeeAnn touched on with the cover letters, that goes along with when you do get a referral and you're following up with a school, make sure you do your research ahead of time. What is the school's culture, and what is their curriculum? What is their grade levels? You want to make sure that you are prepared. If you might get a phone call from the head of school, and you want to make sure that you've done that. You've looked at that information, and you're at least having a good idea of the school and their information. And then when you write that cover letter, make sure that is personalized. So that's something else that make sure that you do that, and make sure it's individual. And then if anyone else has other questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. We did get a question just to clarify about when specifically college seniors might want to expect to be interviewing, and I would say now. We have a lot of intern and fellowship roles that are listed, and we've referred candidates. So right now, fall, winter, certainly busy. But again, we have some schools that won't start their hiring until later in the spring. So it definitely could go for the next several months. But be prepared. I would say be prepared to get that email about a scheduling interview in the next couple weeks, or it could be all the way through the summer.
And simultaneously, because that that timeline is so large, and obviously, I mean, you may wake up every day and hope and cross your fingers for, a position from Carney Sandoe, but we're guessing most of you have, different irons in the fire. You're, exploring different careers or different options, perhaps even grad school rather than working next year or just whatever it is. So if your timeline changes, or, if you find a job in marketing, or if you, take an internship in finance, or you decide to go to grad school for something, that's totally fine. You're by no means, blacklisted from us. And it's not like we feel dissed or hurt or, like we missed the opportunity to help you. We are here to operate on whatever schedule you want to operate on. So if you want to come back to us after a master's of education that you pursue, or maybe you do Teach It for America and you come back with 2 years experience, or, whatever it is, we're here to help you at any stage of your career. Because, obviously if you're a college senior, you can't necessarily wait around for, a Carney Sandoe school to get back to you if it's June. So if you want to pursue something else and then come back, that's absolutely fine.
Another question that we got ahead of time was asking around what time of year are the job offers typically offered. And I think that something that's helpful to know is that every school is different. We have some schools that are, they have, an HR, and they've told us they will list the job for 2 weeks, they'll interview for 2 weeks, and they'll have an offer out by the end, very quick. Some schools really will, draw out the process. So an offer could be 2 months after you started conversations with the school. So normally I'd say an offer is going to come sooner, obviously the later in the hiring season. But, really it's going to just depend on the school. We do have some that are going to, if they find the right candidate, they're absolutely happy to send an offer in January. They're good to go. Great. They've got their, their new first grade teacher for the fall. Some schools, they're probably going to take their time a bit, January and February, and then, they might a little bit quicker with their offers, as we get into the later spring. So, feel free to, again, if you're not sure what's going on, if you haven't heard from a school in a while, you can definitely check in with us. We do get the question about whether you should follow up with the school if you haven't heard from them. Sometimes that depends, but normally I'd say that if you have been interviewing with the school and they said they were to get back to you, if it's been a week, maybe follow up gently with a sort of, hi, I'm just still interested, but that's it. We wouldn't call the school, don't want to bug them. And then again, if you aren't really sure what to do next, you can ask us and we can give you kind of some advice as well. But, normally schools, obviously you can imagine hiring contacts are super busy. So do kind of give them that benefit of the doubt, and it might take a little bit longer than you would like, but, normally they do try and move forward and at least will let you know if they've moved on with, their candidates.
I think sometimes putting the hiring process in the perspective of that it's larger than you is also important. So like if a school is not getting back to you, if they're sort of dragging their feet on timeline, that might be because it's a tentative opening, and someone has said they're going to retire, or someone has said they're going to stay at home with kids, and then they decide, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. I had a really good year this year. I might want to come back. They're going to give that person the time and the benefit of the doubt to sort of figure that out. Similarly, if say, this might not be the most desirable way to land a job, but it's a way to land a job. Say you were the second or third candidate in line, and their top candidate, or the person who they really wanted for whatever reason, said no, or they took another job, or they had 2 offers simultaneously and went with the other one. That can also put a delay in things. So you never quite know, whether for better or for worse from your situation, what's going to happen. But we can also assure you it's not necessarily an indication that you weren't qualified, or that you had no business being in the interview process, or that it was a waste of your time. It could just be that, like say you're a finalist, but you don't land the job. There could be somebody with your same qualifications who was a former parent, or who knows the person on the admissions team really well, or can coach baseball, and they really needed a baseball coach. So, with that in mind, I'd say that the flexibility and the adaptability that we were talking about earlier, it definitely behooves you to remain flexible throughout the entire hiring process. Because again, you never quite know what's going to seal the deal for you in terms of you landing a job, or what's going to prevent you from getting one. But it can be a whole host of factors. So.
Great. Well, I don't think I see any other questions. We are hoping that this webinar was helpful, and of course, other questions might come up. So, you can reach out to us, like you mentioned, puzzle blogs, or check there first to see if your question is answered on there. But I think we're all good. If you, like I said, if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to us. We appreciate you watching, and unless there's anything else. We good? All right. Well, thanks again. We wish everyone a good luck with their search. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.